Do it in the now, he says. My name is Julie. I'm a drug addict from Wichita, Kansas. Hi, guys. My heart's real full of love for all of you. And I forgot to bring my Kleenexes, and I'm a real mess. I was hoping maybe, if I overslept, I'd be just too tired to be nervous, and I'd just stumble in here, get out, and whatever would happen, would happen. And I was one of those people who was going to write a speech, too. I could really relate to Russ last night. God saw to it that I didn't have time, to make any notes or to make any outline. And, you see, they got a spiritual midget to talk first this morning, not a giant. Everybody I've come in contact with, when I tell them that I'm real nervous about this, and, I want to write something down and I haven't had time, they say, it'll be all right, don't worry, just be cool, have faith, God's going to do it. I say, bullshit, I want to have notes. I want to have something here I can hold on to. And that's kind of the brand of spirituality that I struggle with. I want to see it, I want to touch it, I want to taste it, I want to feel it. If I don't have all those things together, then I can't believe it. And that was the thing that I struggled with for years and years before I finally came to believing in a God of my understanding that I could trust in and depend on. I began to learn to touch and feel and taste and hear and see because he gave me all of you, and then I could believe in it. But before that, I had nothing to look to tell me that it was real, that love was real, or that the feelings that I had were real, or that what I needed, was real, and it was real love. I have a suggestion. Is there anybody here from Florida? I thought I saw Johnny running around here. Maybe not. Oh, I know they're so sleepy this morning. To put a chairperson of a world convention on Sunday's program, Ronnie, to speak on spirituality, is either just totally insane or it's the right thing to do because, we've done a lot of praying in the past 4 days. And a lot of ranting and raving, and that's lots of times the way I communicate with my higher power. Aren't you going to come through this time? All right. Oh, no, you're not going to come through this time. Okay, this is it. You're not going to come through. And he always comes through. Last night, it was just sheer panic. It was just sheer panic. And I was saying, if I had a theme song, it would go something like, no faith, no faith. Because Russ wasn't here, and we kept calling his house, and nobody would answer, and it turns out the phone was disconnected. And, he's on his way. So that meant, at 9 o'clock that morning, he was on his way from Norman, Oklahoma, which isn't too far. And at 10 o'clock, nobody answered, and he was on his way. And at 2 o'clock that afternoon, he was still on his way. We thought, well, maybe he's hitchhiking, And at 3 o'clock, and finally, I thought, well, he's had an accident. Something's wrong. But those who knew, and those who have more than that seedling kind of faith that I'm experienced with said, it'll be okay. It'll be all right no matter what happens. If he doesn't show up, it'll be beautiful, and that's the way God wants it. And if he does show up, then you'll know that all your fears were wasted and for nil. So I learned another little lesson last night about spirituality, about how little I have, about my lack of faith, and about practicing these principles, these spiritual principles that make up this spiritual program. I don't believe that there's a spiritual part to it. It says that these are the principles that made our recovery possible, and that this is a spiritual program, not a religious one. And I guess that's where it's at for me. When I came into this program, I had no intention of getting straight, no intention of getting clean. I just didn't want to be locked up in the psych ward anymore. I'd liked it for a number of years, because they gave you 3 square meals a day, and they changed your sheets, and the nurses were nice, and they gave you drugs. And it was a safe place to go when the depression got to be too much to handle. It was a safe place to go when the methadone program got mad at me and told me I was acting like a 2-year-old. It was a safe place to go when I was scared my old man went to jail. And for a while that was okay. But came the day when my psychiatrist actually, and my psychologist actually looked at me and they said, well, we've just never had any luck with junkies. Nobody seems to make it. We try methadone and we try psychiatric wards and we try everything that we know, that is supposed to work for people with problems, but you kind of people and your kind of problems are just unsolvable. And we think that probably what you need is a 2-year stay in Topeka State Hospital. Because 6 months isn't going to do it this time, 30 days isn't going to do it, you keep coming back for more. We give you what we've got and it's never enough. Of course, nobody had ever mentioned Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, that you could get together and find some love without being chemically dependent. And hey, when they said Topeka State Hospital, or you can find something else, if you can find something else, you can choose that, I started looking through the phone book. That ended up being my last stay in the nut ward. And it was the worst. It was the time they locked me up and would not let me out. It was the time the shrink said, no more good time drugs for you. That's it. You've got a choice. It's Melloryl or nothing. I said, well, I'll take the Melloryl. What do you do? I've been walking to go see I'd been walking, the Thorazine shuffle, and I figured Melloryl Mellow wouldn't be too much different. So they took my methadone away. They detoxed me, little by little. Gave me quinine for 2 weeks, and I knew it. I knew it, but I didn't want to believe it. And the doctor came in and said, I've got good news for you. Do you realize that you've been straight for 2 weeks? And this is where my spiritual, message begins today. I said, call a priest. Get a priest up here right now. I want a priest, because I'd never been straight for 2 weeks, man. And I wasn't straight that time for 2 weeks, and that's what scared me. That's what scared me, because that was, before I got locked up that last time. You see, I would go to the psychiatric ward, and it was like I would take 4 suitcases, and I would have evening gowns, and I would have all these clothes, and I would have my electric curlers, and I would have all this makeup and everything, and I would go to the nut ward with all my stuff, because I lived there, and so it was real comfortable. And they'd give me a pass every day. They'd give me a pass to go to work, and a pass to go to school, and a pass to go out on dates, and a pass to go to the symphony. And so what would basically happen was that I never got clean. I was supposed to be getting clean. I'd get off the methadone program, check into the nut ward. They'd detox me on Dolafine and think that I was clean. They'd think that I was clean. But of course, what happened? Every day I went out on pass, I fixed some dope, and would come back. And so that day when they said, you've been clean for 2 weeks, I knew that it was a lie. I knew right then that pretty much everything in my life was a lie. That maybe if that time I had been a little honest, I would be okay. That I really would be clean and I'd know what that felt like, but now I wasn't going to know what that felt like, because he was going to discharge me from that hospital again, and he was going to discharge me with a habit. I never left a psychiatric ward without a habit, at least as large as I came in with, probably more. And, yeah. I called for a priest, and they sent a Southern Baptist chaplain. And, well, I couldn't relate, I couldn't relate. I'm an Episcopalian by nature and by upbringing. My whole family, they're here. They know this story pretty well. It was a hard time in our life, And that day especially, I think, was something that took a lot of guts for them to live through. I was loaded. I don't think it took as much for me, but it took them a lot. Well, they called for this Southern Baptist chaplain, and they sent this poor young man, and it was like he was like an intern, and so here he is. I don't know what I wanted to tell him. Maybe I thought maybe it was a 5th step and I didn't know it. But I wanted to talk to somebody who was close to God, because I was so far away. And I knew that, in my upbringing and as an Episcopalian, the people in my life that I had had the most respect for, the people that had seemed the most mellow and together, were those Episcopal priests. The people that were a great influence on me in my younger years were the people that I grew up with in church, and the Episcopal priests. And I knew I wanted somebody that was close to God, because, as I said, I was so far away. And I thought, well, if you get them there, then maybe he'll follow. Maybe God will come too, and then we'll all be here together, and then maybe I'll get clean. Maybe this time I really will get clean. And maybe it won't be a lie anymore. So they sent the Southern Baptist chaplain. In the meantime, I got real scared. My parents up to this point, I don't know. You might have to ask them. We went round and round about this. My father would accuse me of being on drugs, and I would deny it. And Mom would believe me sometimes, and eventually, I said, I got to come clean with these people. I can't stand this anymore. And I tried to call my mom on the phone. I couldn't get a hold of her, so I called my father, and he and I have had it's an okay relationship today. But we fought ever since I was 12 years old, And so he comes to the hospital, and we begin by sitting down with the Southern Baptist chaplain. This little guy's just shaking. He doesn't know what I'm going to do, I'm just this nerd, and I'm in the psychiatric ward, and I weighed 98 pounds, and here we go. So he's into my dad, and I sit down, and it begins out as my confession to my father of all the wrongs I have done. And it would have been beautiful if he hadn't agreed with me, if he hadn't said, yeah, I know, I know, you're right, yeah, and told me that everything I said I was, yeah, he knew I was. and he was hurt and disappointed. So, of course, immediately I got real defensive, and anyway, by the end of the conversation, the Southern Baptist chaplain was like in between us saying, you know, I think what she's saying is, and I think there's a communication problem here. And every time after that, when I go into the psychiatric ward, this poor little guy would, you know, I guess they put you on their card or something, you know, and then they always come to see you. They're going to give you the word, you know, and he would come to see me, and I kept getting worse, of course, after that. So eventually, you know, during my last time, the time that they locked me up, you know, I would hear him at the door, and I'd pull the covers over my head and just start screaming, you know, and then I scared him away, and he never came back. He was trying, though. He was trying to bring me some kind of message, and I asked for that message. But when it got too close, I rejected it because I was still afraid of letting go of the things that I had used for so many years to keep me comfortable with myself. And those things weren't working anymore, and I knew they weren't working. But to reach out in faith like that, to reach out to something I couldn't see or touch or feel or hear, and hey, I wanted immediate results. You know, I wanted immediate results. I wanted the show. I wanted the spectacle. See, I really could relate to Russ last night. Really could relate, because I have a real ordinary spiritual experience, you know, an ordinary spiritual story to tell. I heard Cliff last year in Atlanta for just a few minutes when he got up and talked, and he's the kind of person, you know, that you want to give a talk on spirituality. I mean, he gets up and he talks about lying in that bunk, you know, in that detox ward, and having those withdrawal symptoms and saying his first honest prayer, and he wakes up, you know, and all the withdrawal symptoms are gone, and it's just beautiful, and it's the kind of thing that just brings tears to people's eyes. I know, it's never happened to me, you know. I always wanted God to come through right on schedule, but it was my schedule. And I wanted something flashy, you know. I wanted something that would show. And I wanted something I could write about, you know, like an article for the New Yorker, or something I could, you know, read and something I could talk about, you know, and really impress people with. Real ordinary, real ordinary. All I know is that, to begin with, I did have some kind of, I had a good religious upbringing. I had a good religious upbringing. Went to church in the Episcopal Church ever since I was a little girl. Mom made sure we got there every Sunday. It was okay. There's a beautiful, beautiful religion, and the ritual is something that very much impressed me, but you see, I never got to the feelings. I never understood what was behind all those prayers and up and down. You know, you sit to listen, you kneel to pray, and you stand to sing, you know. Those are the only three things I could remember. And I would just say that stuff by rote, and it would be real pretty in the priest, and it would be real mystical and real, you know, all this ritual. And never really understood it. When I was in high school, we had a youth group in our church, and God, we were good Episcopalians, and Episcopalians are not too much for this emotionalism. You know, they're not like the Southern Baptists. I mean, we just do it, and we do it quietly, you know, and then we go home. And my friend and I were looking for something else at that point in time. You know, I'd been looking for something else for a long time. And we went to Southern Baptist. Always played this part in my life. We went to this Southern Baptist church, you know, and I got saved. God, and it was beautiful, and it was all those things I was waiting for. I mean, it was like love, and they hugged you, and they were smiling, everybody was crying. We didn't have that in our church. You know, you walked in, and one of the cardinal rules was that you never looked around behind you. You know, you always kept your head forward. It was just not appropriate, you know, to look behind you. But these people, you know, laughing and hugging and singing and crying. And we went back and told our priest what had happened, and we shared it with this youth group, and he just said, well, we really don't go in for that sort of thing. You know? God, I was crushed. My spiritual experience. And it's been translated into, we don't go in for this sort of thing. And he's a man that I loved, you know, and still do today. But he was right, you know. I had caught that emotional glimpse of love and feeling and caring, but I didn't know how to practice. I didn't know how to work with those feelings. I didn't know what to do with them, and they were so scary that I would consistently shut them off. And they would break out again, and I'd shut them off, and they'd break out again. So that was, I guess, spiritual experience number 2. And then went away to college in Colorado in 1972, and was doing some dope by then. A little, here and there. My best friend and I would drop LSD and watch, you know, cartoons and read Zap comics and smoking dope and you know, getting high and drinking wine. I was an emotional eyesore, wreck, you know, by that point in time at age 17, scared to death. You see, everybody expected that Julie was going to do and be a whole lot of things, because Julie was student council president and junior class president and straight A student, and she got all these college scholarships. And everybody knew she wasn't going to stay in Wichita. You know, she was going to get out, right, and make it. And I hoped I was going to do that, but inside I had all these feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, and I pretty much figured that I couldn't make it. I was willing to try. Got in this car with 2 other people to go to Colorado, and Mom and Dad and Aaron and Jamie got a U-Haul trailer with all my things in it. They were going to follow us. On the way there, coming down that 2-lane highway, a drunk semi-truck driver jackknifed across the road, hit the car that had just pulled out in front of us. In fact, what had happened was that we were coming up the highway, and this car pulled out from the shoulder. They had changed drivers, and they were going really slow, about 50 miles an hour, and so we had to slow down, you know, to meet their speed. This man jackknifed across the road, and he hit them first, and he killed all the 4 people in that car, and then came us, you know, in the station wagon. Luckily, we were pinned in for a while, but luckily, you know, we really weren't injured that badly. We had to go to the hospital in Kit Carson, Colorado for a while. But I never really connected that, you know, with a feeling of anger towards God, except that I still didn't understand why I was alive, with the feelings I had, with the inadequacies I had. There was a family in that other car. Hey, there was a mom and dad and 2 kids, and I was just a screw-up, you know. And I got to college late, and I was very depressed. You know, I ate all that starchy food and got fat. You can believe that. My face broke out all year. I didn't want to leave my room. I had this single room because already, see, I was an isolationist, alienated. Everybody else, of course, they applied, you know, for a roommate when they applied to college. Who? Not me. I fought for that single room. I fought for that place by myself. It was about as big as a closet, you know, and I wanted it that way. But I didn't want it that way. I mean, I didn't really want to be alone that way. I was just so afraid of people, you know, that I had to lock myself up in there. And so I continued to use drugs and use more drugs while I was at college to deal with the depression and the conflicts that were going on inside me. On one hand, wanting to live up to everybody's expectation, and on the other hand, see, what I really wanted to be was a junkie. And I told everybody that, you know, and I got a lot of flack for that. I joined a sorority. No, I didn't really want to do that either. But you know, my family wanted me to. My godmother lives in Colorado, and she's a member of that one. I found one friend, you know, 2 friends. And I think there were some other people who would have liked to be my friend, you know, but I was scared to death of them. I was intimidated by them. So anyway, all to make a long story short, it was a horrible year. The grade point average was all right, you know, but the emotions were crazy. And I hated myself. I hated myself because I knew that for the first time in my life that anybody else can see, I was going to fail miserably. I was going to have to leave Colorado College, you know, the brilliant liberal arts college of the Midwest, and go back to Wichita, you know. And I didn't want to come back here that way, you know, the way I looked and the way I felt. I wanted to come back here in a blaze of glory, and it just wasn't going to happen. So my mother came to pick me up when I withdrew from my classes. And on the way back, I remember I don't know if she remembers this or not, but I remember we were talking about my feelings and how just totally miserable I felt. You know, I just didn't really want to live. I didn't have any friends, you know. I'd had that single dorm room all year. I was just a mess, just an emotional mess. And she said, well, did you ever pray about it? Did you ever talk to God about it? And that just kind of riled me, you know. And I remember just almost screaming at her, I don't want any more of your God shit. I don't want anything to do with that. Don't push that off on me anymore, because I don't want it, because I was real angry. I was real angry. And I had to somehow make that break, you know, make that separation so I could go and do my own thing, which was using drugs, you know. And that allowed me the possibility of doing so, making that total separation. Got back to Wichita and wasn't very spiritual, except that I survived. You know, that's pretty spiritual today, looking back on it. I did try to go to church once to get clean. Once. I mean, you know, not like 2 Sundays, 1 Sunday. And, God, I was real sick that day. And Mom asked me if I wanted to go to church. You know, I'd been seeing a psychiatrist by that time, and I'd been hitting the nut houses, and I'd been talking to counselors, and nothing was doing any good. And we went to church, you know, and I weighed 98 pounds still. And, God, I was sick. You know, I'd just shoot dope, and we'd run and thieve and steal, and my old man would go to jail every other week, you know, it seemed like, and whatever old man it happened to be, you know, and they were always, of course, using me just the same way or more than I was. And I went to church that day, and all I remember was that we sat in the balcony, you know, I started crying because I had all this guilt and remorse, and I didn't know what to do with it. It was the same kind of thing. All the feelings came to the surface. I had all these feelings, but I had no action plan to follow them up with. I knew that I felt real guilty and real remorseful and real ashamed. And I walked down that aisle to communion just sobbing my little heart out, you know, and I saw like people in the choir I'd known since age 2, you know, And I was real embarrassed because I knew that they knew that I was real sick. I told everybody I had leukemia. They'd say, what's wrong? And I just ended up telling them it's a terminal disease. How right I was. How right I was. But I didn't know it at the time. It was just easier. You got a lot of sympathy for saying, I've got cancer. And they'd say, oh, God, you're so brave. And then you can, get all that, and feel kind of good about the whole thing. But I was real sick, and I tried that day in church, but I didn't fit in. I didn't know what they were doing there. I knew I had all these feelings, and the choir sang, and the priest gave a sermon, and we said some prayers, and then everybody went home. And I was still there with my drug habit, and all my feelings, and all my guilt, and all my remorse, and I was too scared to go up and talk to anybody about them, I thought he was just supposed to come down into that church when you took communion or something and just say, all right, you're healed. It's behind door number 2. And I'd open it, and there we'd be. It'd be glory, places of glory. And it didn't happen. So when I got into this program, I got here by way of a treatment center in Norton, Kansas. And if you guys think this is desolate, go 5 hours, which way? West? Go northwest. Some people can relate to that. It's a beautiful place. It's this converted motel. And there was more love there than I had ever experienced at one time. This was the beginning. I didn't go there to get straight. I got there because my old man went to prison, and I didn't know what to do about it. There's a bug on this damn microphone. And because I was real sick, and because my spirit was broken, basically broken. I could not continue to hustle to use any more the way I had been using for the past number of years. I didn't care if I lived or died, and I didn't have the energy to kill myself. It was one of those, it was a real ordinary kind of story. Y'all know what I mean, Laying in that nut house, locked up, they took away my Valium and my methadone, and they ended up taking away the Melloreal, man. And there I am, and I weigh 98 pounds, and have you ever, had malnutrition, and you just could not eat, and you just kept getting loaded, and you could not eat, and have you ever tried to sleep, your bones stick out, and you try to lay on your back, and you try to lay on every side, and I didn't sleep, and the only thing that gave me any relief was that I would lie in that nut ward in front of the stereo that they had there. See, a lot of people in that particular nut ward were very sick, and they spent a lot of time on the floor. They would roll on the floor, and they would grab your ankles as you walked by, and they were just always on the floor. They were rolling around on the floor, and so I just got down there with them, and boogied, and I'd lay down in front of that stereo, and that Blue Oyster Cult song would occasionally, I'd lay and wait for "Don't Fear the Reaper." I'd lay and wait for that. I'd listen to that. I'd feel okay. And then the song was over, and I'd feel not okay again. And as I said, they wanted me to go to Topeka State Hospital, but I found out about this place in northwest Kansas, didn't know what it was, looked it up in the phone book. We happened to know a social worker that worked at the hospital, and another man who said that he would come and see me and interview me for a position. I thought, well, I was student council president. What do you want? Interview me for a treatment center. And God, he scared me to death. He came up to see me, and I knew he was drunk, because you just don't smile like that and be straight, And he said, "Hi, my name is Martin, and we would really like for you to join us at Valley Hope. We think that you would like it there." And I thought, oh yeah, here it comes. Okay, you know what kind of place this is. They're going to con you into it. Then they're going to give you electric shock treatments. They're going to do something dastardly to me. And that was in conflict with my just watching those eyes of his. They just sparkled and shone, and he just smiled, and he was so gentle. And when he left, he gave me all these pamphlets, and I took them into my room, and I freaked. I freaked. In fact, my doctor called him the next day and just berated him. He said, "The nurse is charted. What did you do to her?" I left. I had a psychotic break. I didn't know what was going on. What happened was that I looked at those pamphlets, and there were pictures of people just like him, and they were smiling, and they were happy, and there was hope. And that wasn't me. And I knew it wasn't me. And I wanted it to be me. At that point, I wanted it to be that way for me too, but it just wasn't. And so the spirituality, came back into play. It was the first, just like the rest, it was my first honest prayer. I don't remember what it was, but I remember how it felt. Total sheer desperation, like just clawing to get through whatever it was that was keeping me from him, I didn't know it was myself. And I didn't know that all that clawing I was doing was just, that self-destructive trip that I'd been on for a number of years. And yeah, I came back, out of the psychosis. And I do remember that, before I was praying, somehow they got me to that treatment center. My dad, my best friend, took me. That's when the little miracles continued to happen, because it was a series of events that were miracles that got me to that treatment center. The right people in the right places at the right time combined forces, under my higher power's explicit instructions to get Julie to treatment. Get her there, get her well. And I got there, and my roommate presented me with this little plaque that she had made. And neither one of us, Wright, had ever had any exposure to the program. Of course, y'all, guess what it was? It was a serenity prayer, And I didn't know what it meant, but it was real pretty. It was something from home. Somebody cared about me. I kept it with me all through treatment. As I said, I didn't want to get straight. I was not a model patient. I got high 3 times, and they never found me. I thought I was slick, Got high, and then my friend Carmen and I would go back and make the popcorn for the patient group, and God, around all these sober alcoholics. They're all cowboys from northwestern Kansas, and we're high. We're making the popcorn, and we're trying to be cool. And at some point during treatment, somebody said to me, or I heard somebody say, maybe they didn't say it directly, you ought to spend some time in the chapel. If you're having a hard time, with this HP, this God as we understand him, go find one of your own. Find one that means something to you. And maybe sitting in the chapel would help. I mean, maybe that's something that would calm you down and center your thoughts for long enough so that what he's trying to tell you might get through, dummy. I didn't do really anything right in treatment, except that a couple times I did go to that chapel. And see, it was still for show. It was still to impress everybody. It was like, I'd have a real desperate look on my face, and I'd pray, and I was hoping somebody would see how sincere I was, and God, Julie's doing the right thing. And I didn't have the good intentions, and I didn't have the good feelings, but I acted, because they said you can fake it till you make it. You can act your way into a new way of thinking. You can put your shoes on your floor by your bed, and that way you got to kneel down every once in a while to get them. You can pretend that you believe in God and that he loves you and that you know that he loves you. You can pretend that things are going to be okay and that you have some hope. It's okay, to just begin that way. It says that we came to believe. It's a spiritual awakening. For me, a long, slow, gradual process. Kind of like when I wake up in the morning, I start out, my eyes are glued together. And I'm a creep, I'm a real creep to be around. And my awakenings are like, oh, Marcia knows. Oh, God, Susan, if she's here, she knows. I just stumble around and I scream and yell and shout, and I don't want to greet that day. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And eventually my spirits perk up and I get a little cup of coffee and my eyes are a little bit more open and I'm feeling a little better about things, and that's kind of the way my spiritual awakening has been. My eyes and my heart were just glued shut, out of fear, and from anger, and from depression, and from loneliness. And those people at that treatment center said, that's okay, that's okay. If you just pretend like you're willing, pretend to yourself, God knows, and he'll take care of the rest. And sure enough, he has. Sure enough, he did. I left that treatment center not really having any idea what conscious contact was all about. I didn't understand the steps, and when they said a sponsor, I thought they meant somebody that got you a house when you got back. When you didn't have it, and I was looking for one of those. Sugar daddy probably is what I was looking for. But I came back, And they had told me, you see, at that point in time, why don't you go to NA? I said, forget it, you know. I've been to one of those, see, because I'd been to an NA meeting 2 years before, and we were all loaded, you know, and everybody, and this was led by a parole officer who wasn't even an addict, you know. It was group therapy, and one guy, his name was Brad, he was all loaded on cough syrup, and he took off in his car the wrong way down a one-way street, and I knew they were all jokers, you know, and I knew that they just went there to swap drugs, you know, so I rebelled against the whole thing, and I ended up going to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, to probably the only AA club in town at that time that would have accepted me with love, and that was Expansion AA. See, because they let me hang around there for 6 months saying I was a drug addict and I continued to drink. And God gave me what I could handle, and He's given it to me in small doses, because I'm like the rest of you, I'm real sensitive, my feelings are real easily hurt. I've got a lot of problems that way. I'm real immature that way. I was very fragile when I came out of treatment. Oh, tough, you know, a survivor, you know, in a sense. But when they started stripping those defenses away and peeling the layers off that onion, there was just a very vulnerable, very afraid human being down in there. And had those people at that AA club said, you can't come back, or I think, you know, they had to have known I was drinking. Did they know, Harold? Oh, you don't know. Harold doesn't know. They had to have known. I mean, I think my sponsor knew. And see, I thought it was okay. I was that sick. I thought it was all right to do that. I thought it was okay not to shoot drugs and go to AA, and you could still drink if you weren't an alcoholic. I mean, it didn't matter. I didn't realize that to them, you know, it was like it was something you weren't supposed to do. And so for 6 months, those people let me hang around, and I was phony, you know. I was dishonest, and I was trying to impress everybody. And I was going to make sure they saw me, and then I got their attention. Oh, man. And they still let me stay. And they were never really rough with me. They were very gentle. And then one night, they had this group conscience, and we had begun our little NA group at the time, and we had one meeting a week, you know, and they had this group conscience at my AA club. Man, they were keeping me alive, you know. There were 2 of us in our NA group, 2 of us, my sponsor and me, and another guy that used to come. He was a parolee, and he used to pick our pockets during the meeting, you know, so we'd leave with, like, no money and shit, you know. And then they sent this other lady down. God, what was it? We kept saying, why are you here? And she said, well, the judge thought it would be a good idea. I'm trying to quit smoking cigarettes. I said, lady, the judge don't send you down here to quit smoking cigarettes. Well, it appeared that she had a little anger problem. And it appeared that the anger problem was due to getting drunk and beating up her old man. And so that was the group we had, you know. And here these AA people, they had a group conscience about drug addicts. My friends, my people, the people that had kept me alive for that 6 months. And it was like I was real afraid they were never going to let me come back. And at that point, honesty began to creep in, because I knew if those people in that fellowship kicked me out of that door, well, I figured that it wasn't going to be all right anymore. And I was going to die because NA wasn't strong enough to support me. It probably would have been, but that's not the way God planned it, you know, at that time. And my sponsor stood up for me, and Annie, she used to be from Wichita. And they gave me a lot of love. They said, you know, we're going to let you come back, and we're going to be your friend. And we don't care what they say, but it ended up that I could come back, and I ended up in the process taking my first step with alcohol, admitting my powerlessness over the drug alcohol, and so that was okay. So I was starting to get real, and I was starting to find all my character defects. I was starting to find, oh God, the extent of how sick I was, how really sick I was. And things on the outside got better, you know, I got my car running, and my old man went to a halfway house in Kansas City to the NARA program, and I got a place to live. I got a little apartment, you know, and I got a little job working for $2.30 an hour, working with little black kids, with preschoolers, you know, and I loved it. I loved it. It was wonderful. And things were looking better on the outside, but on the inside I was realizing that I was sick, and I had all these character defects, and I didn't, you know, the extent of them was really a lot. And I would say this prayer. I began with this prayer, you know, God, would you just help me work on something today? I mean, if I learned to tie my shoes without my hands shaking, you know, if I learned to say the right thing, you know, if somebody says hello and not just go off and say some totally dumbass thing, you know, like start telling them my life story, hi, how are you, you know, and I go into a 30-minute monologue, and, you know, if you'll just help me learn to do some of these things and learn to live like a normal human being, would you help me keep some food down, you know? I don't care how I get better, but God, I want to get a little bit better, and there's so much wrong, you know, that I don't even know where to begin, and I don't care where I get better, but just, God, would you please help me to do that? And I prayed that every night, you know, because I'd get in that bed and I'd think about my character defects and what a yo-yo I was, you know, and how I wasn't using drugs, and I was totally miserable without them. and that the only relief I got was from people that were so much neater than I was. I had it so much more together. And then that prayer changed a little bit as I got a little bit better through the love and the fellowship of the people in this program. It started to change. It started to be, God, please help me to find out who I really am, and when I find that person, please allow me to accept her. I guess that's kind of maybe a specific prayer, but see, I'd been a phony for so long, and I was real scared of what I was going to find in that closet, when I opened that door, did that fifth step, took that inventory. I was real afraid that it, wasn't going to be that success. I knew it wasn't going to live up to expectations. And I knew it wasn't going to be real. And even if it was real, I figured it was going to be real. Well, it wasn't going to be up to par. And God was going to say, it's a bad machine, send it back, I didn't want to be a bad machine. I wanted to be a real person like the people I saw in AA and NA, because they had smiles and they were real. They weren't like me, and it was just phony, They were dying on the inside and smiling a whole lot. And so I prayed, for God to help me to get real. That was my one hope. Because see, when I got out of treatment, I went back to this therapist that I'd had that wanted to send me to Topeka State Hospital. And he said, would you like to see your reports from treatment? See, I thought I did real good. I really thought I did real good. That's how sick I was. I was suffering from, some kinds of neuroses, and I had a schizoid personality, and, I was real nuts. And most of the people on the streets for a couple of years by that time had been saying, she's just nuts. And it's bad enough, to be an alcoholic, I suppose. And it's worse than that to be the scum of the earth, which is a heroin addict, I suppose. But, a nut doesn't fit in anywhere. You don't say, hi, my name's Julie, I'm a nut, and everybody claps, I mean, I guess they have some anonymous groups in which that they do that and that's beautiful. But I was real scared because I thought that was my symptom. I mean, that was the root of my problem, and I knew that drug usings were just a symptom, and that I was probably just schizophrenic, and I was masking those symptoms with drugs. And so when they took the drugs away, I was just going to flake out a little at a time. They call it decompensation. And I had this picture of it like just kind of shriveling up like the Wicked Witch of the West, in the land of Oz, they pour that water on her, and she goes, like that. That was going to be me, they took the drugs away, and I went, and just nut, and they would all say, of course, all my buddies out on the street, she was always just a nut. And they put that on my tombstone, God, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be real, and I wanted to be okay. And when I got out of that treatment center, that psychologist said, do you want to read your records? And I thought it was going to be real good. And it said, entering prognosis, guarded. And he explained to me that for all drug addicts, the prognosis was guarded, that of course wasn't as good as for alcoholics, and the success rate wasn't as high as for alcoholics. And then there was this paragraph, and all I could see was incapable of becoming honest, pathological liar, schizoid personality, incapable of becoming honest. And then it said, outgoing prognosis, poor. I got worse. That's great. That gives you confidence. You go into a treatment center for 35 weeks, and you come out worse than when you went in. Because they took your drugs away, man. Because they took my drugs away, and I didn't know how to handle it. And yeah, I got worse. Before I got better, I was one of those people who got a hell of a lot worse. So anyway, I wanted to be real, and I wanted to be okay, and I wanted to be able to get honest with myself, and for the first few months of my program, I had to practice total rigidity with regards to honesty. Like, if I picked up a nickel off a table in a restaurant, and I got home and started thinking about it, God, I had to drive back and put it back. If I was supposed to be someplace and I overslept, and I called him and said, that I was real sick and had the flu, or that my car had a flat tire, just those, I'd have to call him back and say, hey, I lied to you. That wasn't the truth. Because I knew that if I began in those old ways and those old patterns, that I wasn't ever going to get well. So another prayer was for God to help me to be honest. And God helped me, and the outsides kept getting better, and the jobs got better, and the cars got better, and my friends got neater, and I got neater, and I had a little more confidence, And the people at the treatment center asked me back to speak at their annual alkathon. Wow. And my counselor said he said he was going to carve a star in his door if I made it, and they asked me back to speak there, to carry a message of recovery and hope. I was the one that had the psychotic break when I saw the pamphlets, because I didn't think there was any hope. For those people, maybe, but what if I try and it doesn't work? Because I'm just a nut, just a nut. And so I had all these different kinds of prayers that I would say, and I began to work my 10th step, and I began to work my 11th step and try to carry the message to the addicts who were still suffering. I got more support, and my NA group began to grow, and it began to get more real, and I began to get more real, and it got better, And In the process, though, one problem with getting more real was that, I kind of had changed my thinking around. Somewhere in that praying, that I would get real, I started assuming that the real me was just everything beautiful. That once I peeled the layers of the onion down to the very little core, that everything was just going to be okay, and I was going to be a perfect human being. I wouldn't have any problems. And I began to find out that the real me was composed of lots of positives and lots of negatives. That the real Julie is just as much that total grouch in the morning, as she is the person who likes to go on 12-step calls, or that the real Julie, has lots of limitations, and she's pretty petty sometimes, and she's real selfish, and egocentric, and doesn't want anybody else to get any of the action, and that's real, and then that's me. And those are the things that I will live with till the day I die to some extent, but I can work this program to some extent, to the best of my ability, to try to live with those and cope with those and hope that those will get better. But anyway, so I had that hassle, I started to get real, and I didn't like some of the stuff I saw. So I really began praying for acceptance. God, please help me accept myself as a human being. Because you see, in the meantime, I had this thing going on with me. If I couldn't be the best, I wanted to be the worst, and I had to have some kind of attention from you all. I wanted your attention in some way, and I wanted you to come up to me and say, you're real special, just to say that, and just hug me, I just wanted to be held and loved. And I wasn't perfect, and I knew that there were a lot of things wrong, and I knew I wasn't living up to everybody's expectations, so I figured I'd play a self-pity trip, and I would go to a whole lot of meetings talking about, I really want to believe in God, and my total fear is that he doesn't love me as much as he loves you. And I'd go off of that, and we had our first annual NA camp out, and Catherine from Atlanta just came up and shook her head. She said, somebody told me that was ego in reverse. Well, I was pissed at her. How dare you? How dare you say a thing like that to me? I got it together, don't you know? I helped start this NA group. What are you talking about? Oh, God, I was real sensitive, and it hurt my feelings, and all I could say was I was real angry, She was right. It was ego in reverse. It was saying, I'm so important that God has seen fit to single me out from the rest of the human race and not love me, I'm so unique that he has chosen me, out of everybody in the world, like out of all the bars in the world, he's chosen me, not to love. And that was the struggle that I had in my sobriety with my God and my understanding. I yearned a lot, I look up at the ceiling because I yearned a lot for something, and I was always looking up for it, and there was always a ceiling there, and it was something of my own construction, and I didn't know how to get it down. And I would yearn, and the feelings and intentions began to come into focus. The feelings and the intentions, but the actions weren't always there. And I wanted to be close to God, just like that day when I got off that dome and I wanted that priest. I wanted to be close. I saw people who were close, but I wasn't willing to take the action to change my behavior so that ceiling would go away, And every time I was just a little bit willing, I would feel that closeness. I would feel that presence. I would feel that power. But then I'd start behaving in some crazy nut way again, And that ceiling would go back, and I'd start screaming at God about it. Well, where'd you go? I need you the most right now. Where'd you go? And of course, the answer is real simple. He didn't go anywhere. I just elected not to act in ways that made me feel good about myself and thus estranged myself from me and from the God who created me. So, so I was trying to get real. And I had ego in reverse. And somewhere in there, I began to learn through Narcotics Anonymous how to love you people. And that was my real, spiritual experience. That's the only one I can talk about, because that's the only one I can really taste and touch and see and feel. Now that's the one that's always there. And I can't put a ceiling or a wall between you and me that you can't break through. Even if I behave in bizarre ways and I try to construct these walls of my own making, you still keep coming. I get real mad about it sometimes, because the walls are still pretty heavily there, and I still have a tendency to be real. Well, I still have a schizoid personality, and that means isolation and alienation, and those are my bags. And God, you keep breaking through them. And that's the God of my understanding today. He loves me, because if he didn't love me, he wouldn't have given me you, If he didn't love me, he wouldn't have kept me alive. If he didn't love me, I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't have all of you, because I have more than all the people in the world that don't have this program. And that's the extent to which my higher power shows me his love. He shows it in a way I can relate to. He gives me tangible proof because I'm a skeptic, and it's real hard for me. And I keep putting up ceilings, and he keeps letting you tear them down. He works through you, because you do the tearing down, but it's his work. So I've been working on those ceilings, and when I talk about not following it up with action, it's like, for the past year, that's why I'm a spiritual midget, I don't have a lot of faith, and I thought, God, I'm going to get up here and talk, and they're going to go, oh, that's great. And it's a real inspiring message, what not to do spiritually, how not to be a spiritual midget. Because for the past year, I've been trying to work my maintenance steps. I did another 4th and 5th last year and tried to get through 8 and 9 and trying to do a 10th step. Well, I've been trying. That's a lie, because if I try, I usually can. That's all it takes. I've been talking about it a lot. I'll go to meetings and I'll talk about it a lot. And my friends in Wichita and Newton and Salina and everybody, Julie comes to meetings and she says, well, I really got to start, getting a routine down about my maintenance steps, and I'm going to go, what I'm going to do tonight, y'all, this is a promise, God is my witness, I'm going to go home and get that little notebook out, I'm going to write that down. And in the morning, I'm going to get up and I'm going to have some time for meditation and prayer, because my prayers during the day are kind of like, hi, how are you? Help me, help me, help me, And I get through the day, and I'm so tired by the end of the day, I go, oh, thanks a lot, and I conk out. And sometimes I don't even say thanks, And so I talk about this, and I talk about this, and I don't do it, and I get my notebook out, for a month, and I'll do real good, and the feelings, the garbage will get out of me, and I'll start to meditate, and I'll do my zazen, and I'll be seated, and I'll center, and I'll feel real good about the whole thing. And then, that's the problem. I'll start feeling real good, and then I'll forget what got me feeling that way, and I'll quit doing it, of course. And then I'll start feeling bad again, and I'll remember what you're supposed to do, and I'll struggle with it for a while, because I don't want to do still what I'm supposed to do, just because I'm supposed to do it. And then eventually, it'll hurt, and I'll, and that's my pattern. So I come up to this podium, not working a good spiritual program, basically, but having, I think, grown a lot spiritually, because today I know that my God loves me. How much time have I been talking, Mary? 3 hours? God, that was my total fear. How much time do I have? And so I got to give this man. I guess I want to close with something about my spiritual growth and what my higher power means to me. And it has to do with this week. Janelle. I know it has to do with this week. Because oh, ye of little faith. When I was 1 year old in NA, Annie went and got me this plaque in the NA group, Cliff and Annie and Mark and everybody, they gave it to me. And it tells my story spiritually. It said, oh, ye of little faith, why did ye doubt? That's me. I got it up on my wall. That's Julie and her spirituality. And I came here with very little faith, but having grown enough spiritually to at least understand the fact today that the God of my understanding loves me. And I guess I can share with you a little about, the God of my understanding, that's not a punishing God today. People talk a lot about when you're in pain, God's testing you. And I may be totally wrong, but, I think he's tested me and I've come through. I'm still alive. I think that was the supreme test, one day at a time. And so when all these things kept happening this weekend, I kept thinking, you're testing me. And I'd start screaming, you son of a bitch, why aren't you coming through? I'm hurting and I want it to work and I want this convention to be a success because I want them all to like me, And if they don't like me, and then nobody's going to show up and everybody's going to have a terrible time and the hotel's going to throw us out. And why aren't you coming through? And all these crises would happen. I got all my clothes stolen yesterday, I had my banquet dress, man. I put it on layaway, the first time in my life I was responsible financially, and it got stolen. And so, of course, like a responsible person, I went out and bought a whole nother set, on panic, total self-will, lack of faith. I've got to fix it. I've got to make it work. I can't just sit back and let go and say, oh, that's all right, God, I know it'll show up. I've got to get my little self into there, and I've got to worm around, and try to make it come out and then feel real bad about doing it that way. But all these things have been happening, and I thought about, well, is God testing me? Is God trying to tell me something? And I guess I came to the conclusion that for myself, there's a lesson to be learned if I'm willing to pick up on that opportunity. Sure, that's true. But that the God of my understanding today, when these things come down, hasn't planned it, hasn't willed it, because all he wants for me is to be happy and to be loved and to feel real good. That's all he wants for me. And so his role, I guess, for me, when these things come down, is just total love and support. Total unconditional, unqualified love. Because he's what gets me through. I don't believe he's what puts me there. I put me there. I test me to the limit. How far can you go and not get loaded? That's my game. He doesn't test me. He's just there. When I open my eyes enough, to figure out that he's always loved me, that he always will, that he loves me as much as each and every one of you. There's a little saying that I was going to go to the hospital and get, and I'll close with this so you can hear Father Phil. This little saying, and he just planned it this way. Julie from Wichita said, "You don't have to tell it just like that, man. You can put it in your own words. You always put it in your own words." But a person in our group, Verla, in our group, gave this to us, and I use it a lot in my work at ATU, and some of our patients have heard it. And it's this little story, and it has to do with how I feel about my God who has carried me, my God who has kept me alive, my God who has loved me, and my God who keeps making miracles happen. It has to do with that, and I just like to share it with you. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it. Oh, God, it's a real beautiful story. It has to do with people like me who don't have a lot of faith and who rant and rave at God, who don't praise him an awful lot, who say thanks when their paycheck is bigger, thanks God, or thanks when their car doesn't break down, but forget to sometimes say thanks, I'm alive. And let me try to remember. It's a story about this man, and he has a dream one night. And in this dream, he's walking with his Creator along the beach. And as he walks, his whole life passes in front of him. Every experience that he's ever had. Everything that's ever happened, he sees. And it's like the parallel to that are that there are footprints in the sand, and he can see the footprints on the beach as his life progresses. And he looks at those footprints, and he looks at his Creator, and he says, "Lord, what's happening here?" Basically, paraphrase. I see that there are two sets of footprints, and then there comes a time when there's one set of footprints, and it looks to me like what's happening, is during the good times in my life, the times when everything was okay and I was a success and people loved me, there are two sets of footprints in that sand, and you were right there. You were right with me. But God, during the hard times, man, during the times when I don't want to go on anymore, and everybody hates me, and I hate me, and I just want to die. Man, you left. You abandoned me because there's only one set of footprints in the sand. And the Lord just smiled. Mine has a sense of humor, my God. And he said, "Oh, no, my son." And he said to me, "Oh, no, my daughter." He said, when there are two sets of that's right. He said, "You're right. 2-to-1, right? 2-to-1. When there are two sets of footprints in the sand, that's when things were going beautifully. And I walked by your side, and I held your hand, and I shared it with you, and I loved you for all the joy you had. And when there were one set of footprints in the sand, and things were hard, and you were lonely, and the night was cold, that, my child, was when I carried you." And that's all. Thank you.